I have a world record. The said record is the highest running vertical jump of 50.5 inches. It's an official record because we measured it accurately, and it'll be ratified by Guinness this summer. More than likely, like a 90% likelihood.
That's a big word, ratified.
Yeah, it's gonna
I
be
don't even know what that
ratified by
means.
Guinness. The reason I was able to do this, a big reason, is by doing something called full approach max effort jumping. Today we're going to talk about its importance, how to fit it in your training, downsides.
What's your
to it.
name?
My name's Isaiah Rivera. You can type it in on YouTube. I'll pop right up. And this is John Evans. He is the man who coaches me to jump high and keep me healthy. And we also together own a business called
THPstrength, which if you go to THPstrength.com, you can sign up for premier coaching by myself and Isaiah Rivera, where you can learn how to jump higher, stay healthy, improve your knee health, make sure that you are the best product you can possibly be, and have the highest potential to reach your genetic limit.
By the way, just because I don't think a lot of people realize what's in it, you get 4 group calls a week with individually. You can go to his call, you can go to my call.
Yep.
You can go to both the calls, talk to us personally one-on-one.
You get your own chat where both of us are in it and Austin, and we check that twice a day, usually in the morning around 10 to 11, and then in the evening around 4 or 5 EST.
You also get a jump training course, the science behind increasing your vertical, and also a lot of information about injuries, in-season training, how to make the workouts easier if you don't have time to train.
And there are tens of hundreds of hours in that whole school community course.
Yeah. And you also get access to Philip. He dunked for the first time, or for the second time in his 40s. The first time was when he was like 18 or something. Very smart. He has his own calls in the evenings and the weekends. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. Oh, you get program. You got a program.
Oh, you get the thing that you pay for is the coaching and the most advanced programming in the world.
Yeah.
And when it comes to vertical jump training,
A lot of little goodies. And if you still are like too expensive, use the code THP for 10% off.
What else could we give you?
Yeah.
It's gonna go up. Buy it now. It is kind of already going up at the moment.
It's $99 is going to go up to $117 pretty soon.
All right. That said, we will get into it. Today we are talking about max effort jumping. We're talking about max approach vertical jumping. So, Isaiah, you told your anecdote. One of the things that made you so good was max approach jumping. In my experience, I have seen that very same thing, right? So I used to jump in high jump. High jump is a max intent, quantitatively assessed sport where your performance is directly correlated to, or it is the direct result of how high you can jump. So as a high jumper, every single session, you're basically going in, measuring how high you're jumping because you want to know what's the highest bar that you can clear. And so I did that 2 to 3 times a week in high school as a high jumper, basically my entire high school career, maybe excluding like my junior, senior year because I was more in the weight room than I was jumping. And that's because I needed to increase my output. But a massive, massive part of that is just regularly max effort jumping. And in terms of dunking, I've seen the exact same thing. Like I pretty much only care about punching one-handers as a one-footer. Like you can ask Isaiah. I spend probably 70+% of the session doing that. I don't even really care about the trick dunks. I just want to crush one-handers as a one-foot jumper, and I like jumping high as a one-foot jumper. So for me, it's probably the most important, if not, no, it is. It is the most important thing in improving my vertical leap. I would say if you're not doing max effort jumping, you are not going to reach your genetic potential. You're not even going to get close, actually, I would argue. It has specificity to the highest degree. It has intensity at the highest degree. So your adaptation is going to be maximized. And as a result of that, you're going to jump higher over time. And that is probably the driver of performance. It's why every single one of my programs have max effort jumping in it every single week. And it is probably the number one thing I learned from Isaiah when I first started coaching him, because as a high jump coach, you actually get away from that, right? You're focusing more on drills and technical aspects, and you don't really want to be fatigued going into sessions. As a dunker, it is the most important thing, consistently jumping at 100%.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that?
Let's talk about, one, the downsides
Oh,
of max effort jumping, and then 2, and we can address this first, actually, because a lot of times I tell athletes that it's the most important thing, and then they're like, let me just go out and max effort jump and and not do a program. So why not just why
jump
not
for
just
2 hours
max
a day,
effort jump
put a
every
Vertec
single
up
day?
and just touch as high as you can every day?
And then 2, why not just jump and then like squat and
Right.
like do very basic weight training? Like why
Okay.
not?
So one is the technical aspects. I think when you add intent, technique goes out the window, and that can really limit your potential, your ceiling. I think good technique is the basis for your ceiling. If you have bad technique, you're going to have a lower ceiling, right? I think even this applies to the penultimate step length 90% of the time, 98% of the time, excluding outliers. You have shitty technique, you have a lower genetic potential, or you have
Lower
a
potential.
lower potential, not genetic potential, but you have a lower ceiling on your output. So if you only shoot for max intense jumping, you might just build horrible habits that are almost impossible to undo, and you'll reach your ceiling sooner, and then you'll have a lower ceiling, and then you'll have to undo those habits, which probably takes twice as much time as it took to undo them
I
as
would
it
even
did
say
to create those habits.
could be like upwards of a year.
It could
like,
be. Well, I'm saying it could be longer than that. Yeah, it's like at least twice the amount of time.
I always tell guys that come to me with bad technique but have jumped a lot. I'm always like, it's your choice. You could try to fix this, but it's gonna take a long time of you jumping lower, or you could just stick to your technique. Because I think generally, if you are max effort jumping a lot, you will eventually, lower, get faster, get good rhythm. But you're gonna be limited in terms of your technique as far as your penultimate step and that type of thing.
I definitely agree with that. And I would say in my experience as someone who had those exact issues, like, dude, my output has gone up way higher. My ceiling has gone up way higher as a result of that. And the better my technique is in a jump, the more output I get out of it, right? The more I lower, the faster I am. Like I told an athlete today, I was like, go watch my last session, watch the 3 minute, or 2 sessions ago, watch 3 minutes of me jumping straight. And what trends do you notice? Oh, when you lean more, when your chest is forward, when your knees are slightly bent more, and you're pushing in with more velocity, you jump higher. Do I make the dunk every time? No, but that's not because I'm not jumping high. That's the technical aspect of actually dunking, right? Spacing, making sure I take the penultimate step in the right spot. But in terms of just pure output and displacement off the ground, you have more room for error if you're jumping higher. And so you need to make sure that you're doing those things correctly to have the highest potential to dunk at the worst possible environments, right? Like terrible environment to punch this dunk, did it anyways because I jump super high and I maintain these things. It's like Isaiah was saying yesterday. He's like, watching you lower him, I can tell you have the same approach regardless of the ball. Where you need to get better is making sure you have the correct approach regardless of where the ball is and still go get the ball. Yeah, exactly. So I think one big issue with max effort jumping is you can build, or every day, you can build those bad habits and it almost becomes impossible to undo them. Second thing, and Isaiah can attest to this, injury. So share your experience with max jumping every day and the major downside, which is crippling knee pain.
The more I jump, the more I get hurt.
Even now, that's still the case, right? And
maybe when I was younger.
Yeah, and no, that's what I'm talking about. Like, talk about your experience younger, how much you jumped, and what happened over time.
So when I was younger, I grew up jumping a lot. I enjoyed it. Played basketball, and when you like playing basketball as a kid, you play it every single day, and thus you jump every day because that's part of the sport. Then when I started trying to increase my vertical, just naturally again, I was trying to touch the rim as much as I could because it was enjoyable. Come 14, 15 years old, started getting knee pain. That was when it first occurred. And
you weren't jumping every day at this point?
I was, but not like dunk sessions. Like it was like I was playing sports every day, and I would go to play basketball every day, and I would try to touch the net every time I played basketball or the backboard and that type of thing.
But when did you start having dedicated dunk
Dedicated sessions started happening when I was not every day, but multiple times a week. Was around 15. Every single day, pure like dunk session. Like I'm lowering the rim. I know this is like there's a purpose behind this. It was when I was 16, and there was always just a direct correlation between how hard I was jumping and how often I was jumping and how much my knees hurt. So I was in a cycle of jump a lot, take time off to get my knees healthy, jump a lot, etc. And this kept happening until I was about 20, and you told me, stop jumping. Stop jumping.
I actually had to, yeah. That was definitely a big part of it.
From there, we actually started using load management. So I had never used any load management principles aside from like resting when it became unbearable. And then we started tracking and using load management principles, and from there it got under control. And my jumping went to 1 to 2 times a week.
But how did your intent change when you jumped from every day to jumping once or twice a week?
My intent was, I mean, it's always been max
as
effort.
high as possible. What was the output? What were your outputs like?
They became higher. I mean,
you started jumping higher by jumping less.
Yeah.
Because the quality of the session was way higher.
Yeah.
And your quantity was less.
And I was able to.
You were able to jump
train
without your knees.
No, I was able to train before.
Yeah, that's true. That's another major issue.
Before it was like, oh, I have a weight room session scheduled. Let me go dunk. I didn't do my weight room session.
So you stagnated because you didn't have any physiological reserve to work with. There was no. Yep. It's like you didn't have an adaptive reserve or a higher output. To function off of. Like
because it stops working after a while.
Yeah. Yeah. What is it called? Residual training effects. Yeah, there's no residual training effects if you jump every day.
Yeah.
Like you're just fatigued all the time and you don't actually have anything that's improved to the point that will give you more adaptive reserve.
Because as a beginner, you jump higher, like you'll just jump higher inherently from practicing jumping, and then it's going to self-intensify because you're jumping higher, so you run faster, penultimate's bigger, the peak forces are higher.
And then
that creates an adaptation, and then you plateau. Yeah, and then when you plateau, now you're jumping the same height every session. Sometimes, actually, mostly probably lower. Your performance starts going like this. So there's no training effect, essentially.
Yep. And I always tell people, they're like, oh, I think I'm just going to jump and not lift anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, how are you going to get better? And they're like, well, I'm just going to keep doing that. And I'm like, yeah. And then what happens when you hit a plateau? How are you going to get better? And then they're like, I just keep jumping. And I'm like, okay, well, enjoy getting worse like for the rest of your days. And we see it happen all the time when guys hit a plateau. You know, they're like, well, the thing that worked for me in the past isn't working anymore. What do I do? And I'm like, you got to train harder and smarter. And you look at guys like Travis. Travis had this exact thing happen. He was like, oh, all I'm going to do is lift like a bitch all year and focus on high quality jump sessions. And guess what happens? He jumped lower.
And then he went the other way recently.
Yeah, and then he realized that, and he's like, I realize I've been training like a bitch. And I was like, yeah, you are. You need to train harder. And he was like, yeah. So I started focusing on that, and now he's jumping higher again.
And this is a problem that I think every elite dunker runs into. The dunkers that don't have coaches.
Yep.
Because there's nobody to reel you in. And
you think you know it all.
Yeah, and then you start.
It's like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah, and of course you're a dunker probably because you like it.
And you think you're better than everyone else, and therefore you should listen to yourself because you're better than everyone else.
So you start jumping too much, and the training sessions take a hit, and you end up being in a multi-year plateau.
It's like it's confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm going to do this because I confirmed it works because it worked for me, and therefore it should work for everyone else. So I'm not really going to listen to these other people because I jump higher than them because of my confirmation bias, and I'm just going to keep doing the thing that worked for me in the past. But the reality is there's no progressive overload. You can't really adapt because all you're doing is max effort jumping, and there's no physiological adaptation. You're not building a reserve. Your ceiling on force production is lower. Your ceiling on rate of force production is lower. Your neurological ability to recruit type 2 fibers is going to be limited. Your ability to recruit alpha motor neurons, which recruit type 2 fibers, is going to be limited. Your axon, your action potential is physiologically going to be limited. Your cross-sectional area going to be limited.
Because you can recognize the importance of training,
happening, but then the quality just goes down so much. Yeah. It's like when I'm having a lot of high quality dunk sessions, I know my lifts are gonna suck, and I can try to push those up. But like in reality, I know if I'm jumping, especially more than twice a week, I can only maybe sustain some kind of intensity, but it's probably going to go down. Isaiah is a perfect example of that. Did a session last week, had an event this weekend, hang power clean 225. Last week he hang power clean 285 or 295, right? Yeah. Like the more he jumps, I expect those values to go down, and I know that, and I'm okay with it, but only because I have done, or he's done his due diligence in making sure he brought up his adaptive reserve over the last 6 months or 8 months, right? The only reason we're doing that now is because you've earned it. You've basically put the time in and the work in to get better cross-sectional area, to make his tendon stiffer, to increase the outer motor neuron output, to make sure he's technically proficient right, left, and left, right, and that his connective tissue is prepared for it.
We say this term all the time, you have to train to train.
Yep.
And I love how you put it, like you earn it. Like earn your ability to benefit from the max effort jumping. If you put in the months of hard training, you're going to benefit so much when it's time to functionally overreach or taper and dunk more frequently. Then you'll actually benefit from that stuff.
You can't unload from not training. There is no unload for not training. Like, you're not unloading at all. You're just detraining. You unload when you build up training volume. And so when it comes to max effort jumping, you can do that. You can load it and unload it. But at the end of the day, you're limited by the intensity of the exercise,
And
right?
if you're too specific, remember, this is all with the umbrella of you might get hurt.
Yep. Too specific for too long. And I used to tell
You
Isaiah
technically
this
could
all the
overload
time.
it. You could just dunk more,
You
dunk
could.
twice a week, have longer sessions.
Progressively. What are you going to do? You're already at a 2-hour session twice a week. Are you going to go to 2.5 hours? You go to 3-hour sessions?
And it's a lot. If you stay too specific for too long, injury.
And it's also training monotony. You are going to hit training monotony. You will plateau eventually, and you will need other things to break through that. There's no progressive overload in terms of intensity. You could progressively overload your volume, but to progressively overload intensity in a jump session, how are you going to do that? Every session is as intense as you can possibly have it. You're always unloaded, maximally jumping. What are you going to do? Lower gravity? You're going to increase gravity? I guess you could use a weight vest, but that we're excluding that. It's just dunk session. So.
And I also want to say, like, if you're a younger athlete, like I'm talking like, age 11 to like 14, 15, I would say, like before you hit puberty, basically. Yeah. Before you hit puberty.
That's different because you're going to get better every week.
Jump every day.
Yeah. You want to know why you're going to get better?
Like, if you haven't hit puberty yet, jump every day.
Talk about Milo and the Bull.
Milo and the Bull is a story. Actually, I'm probably going to get this tatted. It's probably going to be my next tattoo. Yeah.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it on my neck.
Milo was this kid who got tasked with carrying a calf, right, a baby bull, on his shoulders every day up and down a mountain. And as Milo got older and the days went on, the calf got bigger and bigger and started turning into a full-grown bull. And with that, he got stronger and stronger until he was a grown-up, a man, with a full-grown bull on his back, and he was able to carry it up and down the mountain every single day.
Now, in this analogy or this illustration, the mountain that you're climbing up is your jump sessions, and the bull getting bigger is your body weight and you. So as you have these jump sessions over time and you develop, just by the nature of humans' progression as they get older, you will have, especially as a male or female, you're going to get taller. You're going to weigh more. Your output's going to go up just because you're developing. And so if you're jumping all the time, your body weight's going up, right? That is a progressive overload.
And
your output goes up.
This might be, I don't know if I'm going to get the science completely wrong. Is there any credence to epigenetics and hitting puberty while jumping every day? Like, does your body adapt differently because you're going through puberty and jumping that frequently versus somebody that already hit puberty and then starts trying to jump a lot?
I think there probably is some.
I don't know if epigenetics is used correctly. I think epigenetics might be like when you're in the womb. Or like it's like
no, I think it's over life.
Yeah.
It's that your DNA changes as a result of the environment that you're around. That concept has kind of in practice been validated by evolution, right? Like, I guess that's technically not the case because you have organisms that's born and is more fit.
I think epigenetics is short term specifically.
I think it's your DNA changes within your lifespan, whereas evolution's the idea that something was a better organism, still able to reproduce, and then its genetic, its survivability went up, and then
it's way longer. I think it's over like millions.
Yeah, exactly. Where epigenetics is like, I'm a twin. In my lifespan, I jumped more in my formative years. He didn't. Therefore, I had
tendon properties.
My tendon properties are different for the rest of our lives, and there's nothing he can do to get to my tendon properties now. I don't know. I think that there's maybe some credence behind it. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not something where it's like you can never get there, but it's something where it's like your likelihood is higher to get there.
If you are, I'm going to give you two age groups. If you're an athlete you hit puberty, let's say you're 16 to 18, 19, is there benefit to having that phase of jumping a lot? And then also take an older athlete, let's say you're 30, 35, and you didn't jump a lot growing up, now you want to get into jump training. Or like, would you tell them different things in terms of jump a lot?
That's a really good question. I think the older you are, the less likely you're probably going to be able to do that. The younger you are, the more likely you're going to be able to jump more. The older you are, the more time you need to spend having high quality sessions and learning as much as you can from those sessions. The younger you are, the more volume you can have and the less focus you can have on learning those technical skills each session. And that's purely because you're more resilient when you're younger. You weigh less, your tissue is probably going to recover faster, you're going to have less issues. So, you have in terms of motor learning too, we are more, we have higher plasticity, neuroplasticity when we're younger, meaning we can adapt more, right? Like children learn motor skills when they're children incredibly fast, right? Like your daughter went from crawling to walking to running within like a 6-month period of time. That's insane levels of learning in a very short period of time. And when you get into these more complex motor patterns as you get older, they do become more difficult. Now, why that happens, I think, is related to tissue quality as well as, your biochemical system of your brain. We can still learn. We still see that you can learn. You can make changes over time. We see it in Alzheimer's patients. We see it in all levels across the continuum of disease into performance. So you can learn more when you're younger, and so it's probably better because you can handle it to do it more when you're younger, and there's less risk. So it's a cost-benefit analysis, right? The other upside to doing that is that you form better habits when you're younger that you will sustain when you're older, right? It's going to be harder if you've never ridden a bike in your life to learn how to ride a bike when you're older than when you were 6 years old, right? So I think maybe that's the upside. I will also say this. If you jump more when you're younger with shitty technique, you're probably going to jump with shitty technique when you're older. So you want to try to build good habits early and sustain those habits throughout your life. So it comes down to two things. Cost-benefit analysis of your injury risk as you get older, going up, and then being younger, it being lower, and then also your ability to learn being greater when you're younger compared to older, right? So those are the two big things for me. I think, there does seem to be something to jumping more when you're younger, and whether that's like in your ceiling, but burnout's also more common, right? You guys have probably heard of if you see kids that do it when they're 9 to 16, jumping a lot, have a higher burnout rate than the kids that started when they were
like playing sports
15
or something.
Yeah, than the kids that were 15 to 16, right? And so, the impact of that is insane, like you guys remember not Hoopin' Nate, but Nate Hoops, was that it?
Yeah, I think so.
He burned out. He got to 14, 15, got his first dunk and quit. Like, that was the opposite of what happened to us. We became more obsessed.
I actually want to clarify what I said. Like, if you're prepubescent, like 11 to 16, I think one of the most beneficial things you can do is jumping every day, but do it, I think, in the context of sports as well.
Right.
Like, I played every sport under the sun growing up, and it is a huge reason I have the coordination I have today. Like we were talking about, like lobbing the ball and moving my body. Guess what I was doing when I was 13, 14? I was playing football as a wide receiver and jumping as high as I could to a ball that's moving that way really freaking quickly. And I try to jump with good technique and grab it. That's going to be very different than having the same approach from the same spot over and over again as a 9-year-old. You are gonna burn out, and you have to make the argument that your ceiling is actually not going to be as high versus if you have a extensive, it's long-term athletic development, right? Go general.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. So that's the issue with jumping every day and jumping too much, and the issues of doing it at different times. You're going to get hurt. Your ceiling is going to go down. It's going to work for a little bit, and then you're going to plateau. But it is important. Max effort jumping and doing it frequently is important. It's a balance, though. It's not. A lot of people that watch this are going to be like, "Oh, that's all you need to do. Just dogma. Do this, and that's it, and then you're good to go." And that's because it's the simplest thing. It's the easiest for your finite brains to understand. The problem is it's just not true.
Also,
it's not true. It is complex to jump higher at the highest level.
Also, a lot of people that bring up arguments like that they're
just justifying their ignorance. Instead of learning, they're just like, I'm just going to say this because it validates in my mind what I do. It's self-validating. And
there's also
that's not true.
A lot of times there's a lot of confirmation bias because they'll bring up examples of athlete XYZ jumps high, and that's all they did. But guess what? What if athlete XYZ would have had proper training? He would jump higher.
I actually validated this.
Yeah, yeah.
Firsthand. He was like, well, this is what when I first started coaching him, well, this is what Jordan Kilgannon did, and he did blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, think about how much better he'd be if he did X, Y, or Z, or I don't remember who the athlete was. And I was like, yeah, think about how much better he'd be. And then over
Yeah.
the years, I made Isaiah, do it the right way. And, I just moved away from what all the other guys were doing and then hit his plateau and then broke through that 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 plateau. And now he's the world record holder. So,
Yeah. And
yeah, go ahead.
and the other thing too. Oh wait, finish your point.
I was just gonna say, like, it's the proof's in the pudding. Max effort jumping super important, but he did not max jump every day to get from 44 to 50. He jumped probably once a week to get to that point, right? And when he was younger, whatever, there's an issue. But I also, what you guys didn't see is I spent 4 months fixing his knees, and then after that, it was like a year and a half managing it, right, where he couldn't train. And you look at someone like Dom, where Dom's had elite training since he was 16 or what, 15, 16 years old?
15.
Yeah, 15 years old. He got to a point where jumping every day, he plateaued. He got his first dunk. And now he's 5'8", and he's outside of his pulled quad, which is unfortunate. It was him learning in the contest.
How old is he?
I think now he's 20.
20.
19 or 20.
He's going to be a good case study of doing he's going to be a good case study of what would have happened if I would have had THP
when you were younger.
from a younger age, because his max vertical is I think 47. That's his all-time tested vertical, and he did it. When did I have a 47? That was 2019. I was 21, so he's 2 years ahead of mine.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is good. There is going to be a genetic component to that. We'll see. I don't think that he has the same genetics that you do. Obviously, you guys come from completely different backgrounds. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but it's like some people respond better to training, and some people are more genetically gifted. Like Anthony Height didn't train at all. Basically, training made him worse. He could just jump, and that was him. But that's 0.00001% of people. That literally, where that happens. And 99.99999% of people are going to be the opposite. So I think Dom is this kind of ideal, very controlled environment. The downside for him is that he lacks a couple things in comparison to you.
We're talking about at Dom
Dunks.
Dot dunks.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So the difference between the two, you guys, Dom doesn't have the mobility that you have. That is a major detriment to him. And I'm not saying because of his dunk technique or jump technique, it's because of his depth in squats. He can't get the same loading in his knee that you can. And if he wants to do that safely, he's got to find creative ways to do it. And that has been a crazy effective stimulus for you over time. Now, his half squat is finally getting higher, and his power clean is finally getting proficient, but that's really where Dom's at. And I've said it before in previous podcasts that if he wants to get to that level, he has to become more obsessed with those numbers than jumping. And that's a really hard...
While staying healthy.
Healthy, yep. And that's a really hard transition for guys to make. So he knows this. I've had that conversation with him multiple times. So, yeah.
Let's leave him with two things. One, how do you have a max effort jump session? And then two, what should a week look like to not get hurt, still have that stimulus in your training?
I'll start with the second one. You should have 2 sessions a week tops, split up by 72 hours. If you want it at the most, the minimum is once a week. And if you're injured, you might have to back off and do it once every 2 weeks or something like that. Typically,
Switch plants.
Or switch plants, yep. And I like to have athletes set a timer, start to finish. I'm talking from the very first warm-up jump to your last jump. Set a timer. Every 1 minute, you should be taking a jump, and you should progress over time. The first jump starts very easy, and you want to progress according to how you feel over time. You want to add intensity, add intent to the jumps until you can jump at 100%. And then at that point, you would count your max effort jumps, and then you see how many jumps you get in that time interval. But if you're doing it on the minute, which most people find works, maybe once every minute 30, everyone's a little bit different, you're probably going to get 25 minutes, you're going to get 25 jumps. So that's a very simplistic way. Big key picture, you want to always focus on jump technique and make sure that you're trying to do the best you can early on. And then as you get later in the session, you want to shift towards intent. So hopefully you've set in the big picture pieces, and then at the end it's just like swing for the fences, right? Hit some home runs. Hopefully you did what you needed to earlier in the session and then actualize that. The better you are, the less you need to think about that, right? So Isaiah, it doesn't matter how he does it. He could have shit technique at the beginning and he not think about it at all. And then at the end, as he jumps higher, it's more of, Isaiah, you're doing this wrong. And so the more beginner you are, it's focused on those big concepts. The more advanced you are, you have more freedom, more autonomy, and it's understanding what you need to avoid, what mistakes you need to avoid. For Isaiah, it's warming up too quickly. It is shortening his penultimate step, and it's planting in the wrong spot. And I just say, hey, you're doing this stuff wrong. He knows what to do right. He can fix it. So, those are the big differences. Did I miss anything there?
No, I covered it. Covered it pretty well.
Anything else?
I think that's it. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And if you're on a podcast platform, please give us 5 stars. You know where to find training. And that's pretty much it. Catch y'all in the next episode.
See you guys.